Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we're going to the Succah daf Nun Aleph. We are going to begin at the very bottom of Nun Amud Beis. Amar Papa. Papa says as we continue to Nun Aleph Amud Aleph, Kitanoi. Perhaps this is based on Machlokas Tanoim. What's that? So Rashi says, Iker Shir B'Peh O B'Kli, which reminds us of what we learned in yesterday's daf. Namely, when it comes to the music that took place in the Beis HaMikdash, was the main part the Levium singing? Is it Iker Shira B'Peh, or is it the musical instruments? And we said that could be totally, when it comes to the Cholol, the flute that was played, is it Deicha Shabbos, or is it not Deicha Shabbos? If you say that Iker Shira is B'Kli, the musical instruments, so that's part of the Avodah, then that's Deicha Shabbos. But if you say that that's not really the integral component of the Avodah, so therefore it's not Deicha Shabbos or Yom Tov, which is what our Mishnah seems to hold. So Ditnan, so it says in Masechtas Erech in the following Mishnah, it says Avdei Kohanim Hoyu, Divra Meir. It says that they were Avdei Kohanim. So we'll discuss the musicians that were in the Mikdash. What exactly were they? So were they the Avdei Kohanim, or possibly Rabbi Yossi Omer Mishpachas Beis Hafgarim Mishpachas Beis Sipuria, that they came from these families which were non-Kohanim, who Mamunam Hoyu Shahayu Masiyam L'Kahuna, and from them they, as Rashi says, Zu Shem Mikaimam, that was the name of the place, they would marry into Kahuna. Rashi says Yisrael Muchasim Hoyu. These were prominent non-Kohanim. Neshehem almanois ubenois dem ruuyas linasil Kohanim, and they were fit to marry Kohanim. Rav Chanina ben Antanignos amru Leviim hoyu, that they were actually Leviim because, as Rashi says, Al Yisrael pasul nakach, they were puzzled to engage in singing. So my love hokmifli. The one who says that there were avadim, so you would hold that Iker Shira is bepeh, is coming from is the way you sing. Mandi Amr Leviim Hayu, that there were Leviim, Ksaver Iker Shira Bekli. They would hold that the Iker Shira came with the musical instruments. So again, it's totally on whether or not you would say that you need the Levium to be engaged in playing these musical instruments or not. So V'tizbra, Rabbi Yossi Mike Savar. The problem is Rabbi Yossi is this middle ground. Ik Savar Iker Shir B'Peh. If he says that singing's the main thing, then I feel Avadim Nami. So we can allow even the Avadim to play the instruments. Ik Savar Iker Shir B'Kli, then Levium in Yisrael and Lo. If the main thing is the musical instruments, then only the Levium should be allowed to play those instruments and no one else. So that's the question. As again, looking at the top Rashi, al oichse kli shir b'shah shir shel karbon kayomin. So the question is, they're playing the kli shir, they're playing music with instruments. So the question is, why would we allow someone who is not a Levi to do this? It must be because maybe Iker Shira is really the peh, so it doesn't matter if they're playing the musical instruments. The problem is, if that's what the machlokas is, then why is it a three-way machlokas? Iksaver Iker Shir b'peh, Gafil Badim Nami. Iksaver Iker Shir b'kli, then Leviim in Yisrael Lo. Only Levi should be able to play the musical instruments. El the Kuliyam Iker Shir b'peh. Really, the most important aspect is the singing, and therefore the musical instruments really shouldn't matter. Anyone should be able to play them. But they argue in the following way. The Marsavar Haki Havi Maisa, Marsavar Haki Havi Maisa. The truth is, it didn't make any difference. Anyone could do it. But these are the people that played the musical instruments. So my nafkamina. So then why do we really care about all this? Why are they making a big deal about who they were? So the question is, based on their playing these instruments and people see them, will we then say that they could go up to Meduchen V'Yochsen? Do we end up saying that they have good yichus? And also regarding the ability to take meiser. Let's look at Rashi. Haruhu, someone who sees these people, Oimid al Haduchen, Im Levim. You see them, they're standing together, Levim, Ein Sarch Livda Kachara. You don't have to check after them. Lo Asiyam Yucheses. You know, probably, even if it's a non-Kohen, they must have good, maybe they have good yichus. V'lo Asis Lo Meiser Rishon. You don't have to investigate giving Meiser Rishon, which is given all of the 6 years of the Shemitah cycle, and you give it to the Levi. Devadi Levihu, Shemimnei Davar Zeh Lo Hargihu La'amud Sham. Ki'im Levim. The only people that would stand up there must be Levim. So, the question is, do we make that quantum leap? The fact that you see these guys playing musical instruments next to the Levim, so what can we derive from that? So, Mandiam Avadim Hayu, that they were just slaves, Ksavar Ein Mal Meduchen Liyochsin V'Lo Meiser. The fact that they're up there, you're not going to assume that that means anything, that you don't have to do a bedika, that they must have good yichus. No. And giving them meiser, you're not going to give them meiser. You're not going to make those assumptions, and therefore they're avodim. Which is what actually we said, that they actually married into Kohanim, because we are mala miduchen, the fact that they're up there with the Levium, regarding Yuchsin, that they have good yichus for marriage, but not meiser, because they're really Yisraelim anyway. And therefore, because of that, you want to only have Levim up there, because otherwise you're going to end up giving these people meiser, etc. So now let's go back to what we saw in yesterday's daf. We said, as we mentioned, there's a machlokus when it comes to the shir shel karban. When it comes to bringing the karbanos and that song, whether or not it's daicha. However, the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, they both hold it's not daicha Shabbos, it's not daicha Yom Tov. Here we find Rav Yirmiyah says not like that the machlokas is b'shir shel shoeva. That even when it comes to shir, well, I shouldn't say even, but by the shir shel shoeva, there is an opinion that it is daicha Shabbos and Yom Tov, even by the shir shel shoeva. The Rav Yossi ben Yehuda Savar Simcha Yisera Nami daicha Shabbos. Since it's not just Simcha, but simply Yisera, that's daicha Shabbos. Rabbanan Savi simply Yisera in the daicha Shabbos. Of a b'shir shel karban, divrei kol avodahi. However, when it comes to the shir shel karban, that's definitely avoda, v'daichas Shabbos. So therefore, this opinion is completely the opposite of the one that we said before. Meisvei, Pekta Gemara, on this, shir shel shoeva daichas Shabbos, di Rav Yossi Rav Yehuda. We see beferish that it says that the shir shel shoeva is daicha Shabbos. The Chacham Amrim av Yom Tov enu daicha. He says it is not daicha. So on this, it's a tiyufta Rav Yosef tiyufta. So we see very clearly that this statement is actually a refutation on the shita of what we saw before of Rav Yosef. Because what does it say? Again, according to the shita of Rav Yosef, he said that the whole machlokus is dafka by the shir shel karban. But over here we see that the machlokus is actually b'shir shel shoeva, which therefore, that against what he said. He said by shir shoeva, they all agree that it's not daicha Shabbos. Here we see it's a machlokus. So lema b'shir shel shoeva hu the pligi. Maybe they only argue by shir shel shoeva. But b'shir shel karban even called daicha Shabbos, which is according to the opinion of Rabbi Yirmiyah Barabba. So then lema tavtiti after Rabbi Yosef Batarti. Well, we had this at the beginning of the Masechta, like in the Daf Hey area, al Sfasagag, al Emsagag. So he said, let's really slam them down. 2 tiyuftas. And the reason why they do that is not, only need is 1 tiyufta. But if you can somehow get out of it, if we have a second tiyufta to make it 100% irrefutable. So Amalach Rav Yosef Plig B'Shir Shel Shoeva Muadin L'Karban. Maybe they actually also argue by carbon. So this way, you're not going to end up saying that I'm wrong on that side too. So then why is they argue about the Shir Shel Shoeva? Even though they also argue about shir shel karban, not only is it daicha by shir shel karban, which is avoda, but even when it comes to simcha yisera, it's daicha. So it's not necessarily a second tiyufta. But we learned, it says that this is the cholol of beis hashoeva, she'enu daicha lo as shabbos lo as yom tov. Zehu deinu daicha. Now, what's the diak? only there it's not daicha. Although the carbon, daicha. When it comes to the carbon, shir shel carbon, it is daicha. So money. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, if this is referring to the sheet of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, which we said above, Yom shir shel shoeva nami daicha. According to him, he says that is also daicha. El lav rabbanan v'tifta Rabbi Yosef b'tarti tiyufta. So in fact, it is a second tiyufta. So why would anyone say that the most important thing is the musical instruments? Which again is interesting. If you listen to music on the radio, the question is, what is the most important thing? Is it the singing, or is it the words, or is it the music? It's obviously they're both, but which one is more important? If you think about it, how many songs do you have where there's no musical instruments? A cappella. How many songs do you like that only have musical instruments, you don't hear anyone singing? Obviously certain types of music. So it's a difficult question in general. What's more important? So how do we see in Psukim though? This is not just based on logic and feeling, but how do we see possibly that Iker Shir is B'Klin in the Pasuk? The Siv, it says in Dibur Hayom as follows: Yomer Chizkiyahu Lahaloy Sa'oil Lahamizbeach, that he went and was makriv these karbanos. Uve'es Chol Oila Heichel Shel Shir. He began the Shir Hashem to sing, and then it says v'chatzoitzois, and he had these trumpets, these musical instruments. V'ali de Kli David, and through the bringing of these vessels, Melech Yisrael. So what do we see? That the mentions the value and the importance of having a Kli Sharis, having rather the Kli, the musical instruments. So my Talmud the armor Iker Shir B'Peh, that's when you're singing. So the Chsev Vayhi Echad L'Mechatzaitzrim L'Mishayrim, and it mentions the Shayrim, the singers, L'Hashmiya Koil Echad, that you could hear like one beautiful voice. V'idach Naomi Haksev V'Yarma Chizkiyahu, which sounds like it's very important musical instruments. No Hakakemer Hachel Shir Hashem B'Peh. You have to start to sing Hashem with your mouth. Alidi Kli David Melech Yisrael L'Besumi Kaula, and it makes the voice sound better. But the truth is, the music is bepeh, is the ikr. V'idach nami haksev vayhi ka'achad l'chatzatzrim l'mishayimrim. What says l'mishayimrim? It talks about the the singers, the hachkamer. Mishayimrim diomia demechatzrim. Ma mechatzrim b'kli. They use that's a musical instrument. Af mishayrim b'kli. Also, when it comes to singing, it's with a musical instrument, because it's telling you that you cannot have music, even with words, without the kli. They go hand in hand. Okay, fine. Let's see the next Mishnah. Let's see question 7. Mehem atamim de'eshleim rebeshita shel Chanina ben Antigonus shlo haya amuni kli hashir b'mikdash Yisraelim. El Levium Bavad. What was the big deal? Why only Levium? So one is because Iker Shir is B'Kli, therefore you have to have them playing musical instruments, or because we're concerned the Mal Meduchim L'Yuchsim L'Maiser, and therefore if you have someone who's not the Levi doing it, so you may end up giving them, again, assuming that they're fit to marry, their daughters, etc., and that you can give them Maiser, which may not be the case. Okay, let's see this next fascinating Mishnah. The Mishnah says as follows: Mishalora Simchas Beis HaShoeva, a famous expression. If you never saw the Simchas Beis HaShoeva in the Beis HaMikdash, Lo Ra Simcha Miyamav, you've never truly seen real joy. You've never experienced Simcha if you haven't been at the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, which just gives you an idea. It must have been unbelievable. Yom Tov Arishon, and as soon as the first day of Yom Tov finished, Shulchag, Yardu Ezras Nashim, people would go to the Ezras Nashim, Maskinan Shem Tikkun Gadol, and there in that area they made a big tikkun, they fixed it up somehow. We'll talk about what they did. Menorah Shel Zav HaYusham, there were these golden menorahs. The Arba Sefolim Shel Zahav B'Roishehem, there were these bowls, 4 bowls that were made of gold on the top. V'Arba Soil Misluchol Echad Echad, there were ladders that they would have to get all the way to the top. It was so high. The Arba Yoladim Mepirchin Kahuna, there were 4 kids or young people from Pirchei Kahuna. V'yadehem kadim shel 110 lug, and they had these jugs which are 120 lug. Shehein matilin l'chol sefel v'sefel. They would put in each of these bowls all of this oil to be able to make a huge fire. And what would they use as like wood? They didn't use wood, but mavalim mivloim nechse kohanim mumehamnehem, where they used to use the worn-out clothing and pants as like their wicks. Mehem hayu matkin ubehen hayu madlikin. They would use them as wicks, and they would use it to kindle this fire. This caused so much of a huge light that there was never even a courtyard that was not lit up from it. Chasidim v'anshi Maisa hayu mirakdim ifnehem. So the Chasidim and Anshi Maisa used to dance in front of it as we continue to Nun Aleph Amud Beis. Be'avukai shel or shibidehem, and they used to also have fire. They would be holding on to these torches, and Rashi says zarkinaisa klapi mala. They would throw them up, umikablanisam, and then they would catch them like they would be juggling. There's Rashi v'yesh shebikin lasos kain be'arba avukos o b'shmona. Some were experts in jumping and juggling 4 torches, some even 8. B'zarg zu mekabel zu, b'zarg zu mekabel zu. Okay, again, which is juggling, and that's a fascinating thing that they would do. The oimrim lifnehem divrei shiras v'tishbachais. They would be praising Hashem. We'll discuss what that is. Ve'lavim b'kinairis and nevolim v'saltim and chatzaitzos v'klishir b'loi misbar. They had all these different musical instruments and harps and lyres and cymbals and trumpets beyond number. Al chamish esrei malois hayardos me'ezus Yisrael ezus nashim, and they would be by the 15 steps from the Ezus Yisrael to the Ezus nashim. Keneged chamish esrei malosh of Tehillim, which is of course we know there's 15 kapitel Tehillim, which all begin with Shir Hamalos, as everyone says Shir Lamalos. Shalehin Levim Oimdin Bekli Shir. They would stand there with their musical instruments, Yom Shira. The Omdu Shnei Kohanim B'Shar Elyon. There were 2 Kohanim that would stand in the upper gate. Shiarid Me'ezus Yisrael Ezus Nashim. They were going down from the Ezus Yisrael to the Ezus Nashim. The Shnei Chatzaitzos B'Yadehem, and they'd be holding trumpets. Kara HaGever. Once the Gever, Gemara and Yuma discusses, is it a person or is it an actual rooster crowing? Tiku v'hariyu b'taku. They would blow shofar. They would blow the music or blow these musical instruments. Okay, and Rashi quotes the Gemara in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah toward the very end of the Masechta. Yolaf b'chol tekiyos pshuta lefaneh pshuta lachareha of the truo be'emsa. There's a tekiya and there's a trua and the tekiya. Higilu mala siris. When they got to the 10th step, again, Tokabari Bataku, Hagila Ez Lazara, Tokabari Bataku, let's see the parentheses, Hagila Karka, Tokabari Bataku. So they would constantly be blowing shofar at all these different stops. Hayutaikim Hayachin, they would continue blowing, Ad Shemigian Lashar Hayotzim Mizrach, until they would get to the gate which goes out from the east, which, again, the base of Mikdash is situated, the Kush in the west, so they're going away from that area. Once they get to that eastern area, they would turn their faces from the east, Lamar toward the west, like toward the base of Mikdash, toward the Kodesh Kodashim. Other people, they used to turn their backs toward the Heichel. With the name Kedma, their faces were in the east, and they would bow down toward the sun. However, we are facing to you to the west. They used to also say, Tanubam. Mishal ra simchas beis hashoevel ra simcha miyamav, as we saw in the Mishnah. Mishal ra Yerushalayim b'tifarta, one who did not see Yerushalayim in its glory. Or ra krach nechman mi'oyom, we've never seen such a beautiful city. Mishal ra beis hamikdash b'vinyano, one who did not see the Beis HaMikdash being built up properly. Or ra binyan mufur mi'oyom, you've never seen such a glorified and beautiful architecture. So Mahi, what historical time of the Beis HaMikdash is referring to. So Rabbi v'Item Rav Chisda ze binyan Hordus. This is referring to when Hordus decided to do major repairs and fix up the Beis HaMikdash, as we'll see now. But my bunny, what did he do? So Omer Rava Ba'adni Shaisha Umirma, that he used these different types of stone, of green and white, of marble. This is what he used, these different color. Rashi says Shaish Savua, it's this type of color, lo lavan lo shachar, elkein yoroi. Again, it was not white or black, but it was like greenish. It was like a greenish tint. Apik shafa va'ayel shafa, that the building continued to go up, like one row to another row. Rashi says apik shafa. So actually, chuchla says Rashi shisha l'tzavur kechochoil. It was blue. Apik shafa shura shel avanim. There was this row of stones, nichnasa, that went in the shura yoitz, and then another row went out. Kihechin l'kabel sida, so be able to provide a hold for the plasters. So it was like a building of the foundation, so be able to hold everything properly. Sabar l'mashayin b'dahava. He actually was thinking, you know what? Let's make it all out of gold. Omerlei Rabbanan Shafke, you should leave it the way it is. Dahachi Shaper Tfei de Mischazi Kadusa de Yama. It looks like the waves of the sea. It looks beautiful. It reminds us of the sea, and Rashi says Kiu Gali Hayam. So it's much nicer. Of course, also we probably would not want it to be made out of gold, because just like the Kohen Gadol would not enter Lefnai Lefnim in this big Zahav, because in Keteger Nafsa Sneger, we don't want to remind Hashem too much of the mistake that we made with the Egel Hazav. Tanya, Rabbi Huda Omer Mishlo Ra de Yuf Lustun Shel Alexandria Shel Mitzrayim Lo Ra B'Chvaydim Shel Yisrael. Someone who did not see the rows of benches, which again has to do with again rows of sorts, but it has to do with the special quality of what took place in Alexandria, which was a huge Jewish populated area. So if you didn't see that, you would not have seen the honor of Yisrael. Amru Kamin Basilki, it's like a basilica. Gedoylo Haisa. Stiv Lifnim Listiv, again, one column within the other. Pamim Shahayu Ba Shishim Rabua Shishim Rabua. As we said, Kaflaim Kiyot Mitzrayim, there were so many Jews that were situated there. It was comparable to double the amount of the Jews that left Mitzrayim, 1.2 million. Bahayu Ba'ayin Aleph Kisdarais Shel Zahav. There were these 71 seats of gold, Keneged Ayin Al Shel Sanhedrin Gedaila, which corresponded to the Sanhedrin. Kalach Ziachas Einu Pchusa Me'esr Ve'echad Ribu Kikorizav. Just to give you an idea of how expensive this was, they didn't cut any corners. There was none of them were less than 21 myriads of kikar zahav. Ubima shel eitz b'emsis. There was a metal in the middle rather. There was a platform which was made out of wood. He would stand on it. He was holding these different flags and handkerchiefs. Very famous Gemara. It was so crowded, no one could hear the chazan. There was no microphone, and you couldn't hear him because he was who knows how far away. So he used to lift up a certain color, and people knew that color represented saying Amen. So that's the only way people had any idea to know exactly how this was done. And the question is, what do you mean? How are you able to answer Amen if you didn't hear the bracha? Right? So the truth is, you're allowed to, as long as you know what to answer, what to say. It says Rashi, "La'anos amen shahaya shliach shlef niateva garmer birchaso v'heinu hoya chayin kulan l'shmo koil." They couldn't hear him, but it's okay. only you can't answer amen to a bracha that you don't know. But if or also if it's a person who's questionable because who knows what he's really saying. So in this case, it's acceptable. Fine. So again, kimention gil lanos amen. Amen if besuder v'chol oinin amen. V'lo hayoshvin orvin. They didn't sit all mixed up together. El zehuvim they atzman. The goldsmiths were together by themselves. The kasvin b'fnei atzman. The silver makers, they were by themselves. The nachem b'fnei atzman. The blacksmiths by themselves. The tarsim b'fnei atzman. The copper makers of themselves. The Gardiim b'fnei atzman, the weavers were themselves, and the reason why is that because we wanted to say, oh, you're nobody, so you can't sit next to us. No, the idea is, as we'll see right now, if let's say you have an ani, he doesn't have a job, so before the one ads, you would go and find a group of people who have your line of expertise, and they may need your help in a project. You'll be able to hopefully be hired and be able to support yourself and your family. Wow, it's amazing. These are great people. They did such wonderful things. Oh, by the way, says Abaya, Vikulu Katlinhu, Alexandrus Mukden. Alexandrus Mukden killed them all. Maitami Yanshu. What did they do to deserve Alexandrus Mukden to kill them? Yishum de Ari Ahaikra. They forgot and they violated an important pasuk, an important mitzvah. Lo soisifan l'shul b'derech haze'oid. V'inu hadarasu. So they were not supposed to go back to Mitzrayim. You're not supposed to live in Egypt, and they did so. Of course, there are many great people, including the Rambam, who at a certain point lived in Mitzrayim. The question is exactly how were Gedolei Yisrael able to go back to Mitzrayim. There's obviously numerous answers to that question, but this is how the Gemara answers why they were punished. Kiyosash chinhu dahavi karu b'sifra. When he found him, he was reading from the following sefer, the following pasuk. Yisa Hashem alecha goyim mirachlik. That there will be a nation from afar. Amr michdi hahu gavra boila mesi sefinta basar yomi. When I came, says Alexandrus Mukden, it should have taken me 10 days. However, Dalia Zika, the wind, Dalia, we also have that word in the first parak, it went up, the wind, Yasis Safinta Bechamishiami, and I was able to get here in 5 days. So therefore, it must be a sign that Hashem wants me to do something bad to them. So Nafal Alaihu Vikatlinhu. So he went, and unfortunately, because of this, he killed them. Okay. Fine. Let's 2 dots. We'll stop here. Let's see a couple questions. Question 7 we already talked about the Levium, whether or not Iker Shir B'Kli, Iker Shir B'Peh. TA1. Ma hoya chatem shel anshe Yisrael b'Alexandria v'ma hoya oinshim. Nun Aleph Amud Beis. So, as we said, they made a mistake that they should not have gone back to Mitzrayim, and the punishment was that they were killed. Alexandrus Mukden, and then there's another girsa of the Gra, Ayin Sham. So that's TA1, and it's a pretty easy question. Nice way to start a test with an easy question. TB2. Ma nafkamina the Iker Shir B'Klio B'Pel Maskana to L'Koyam Shir Shel Carbon Daichas Shabbos. So he said, Lamad Yirma Iker Shir B'Kli Ein Kashel Achis Kli El Levium. Only the Levium were able to hold musical instruments. Lamad Yirma Iker Shir B'Peh Kasher Af B'Yisrael. So even in Yisrael could hold it because no one's gonna derive anything from it. Al Mi Nemar B'Nevua Yisachariya V'Habitu Elai Eis Asher Dekara B'Siftal of Kimismet Al Yachid. We'll see that in tomorrow's Daf Adkan.